Thank you, Acting President. I rise today to speak on the Great Ocean Road and Environs Protection Amendment Bill 2021, and my contribution won't be too long. As other speakers have noted in here and the other place, that this is the second of two bills dealing with the new Great Ocean Road, Coast and Parks Authority. The authority was a recommendation of the Great Ocean Road Task Force about 5 years ago and has bipartisan support, or did have back then. It was an idea that stemmed from the bureaucratic nature of having, quite literally, tens of bodies of committees and having management roles in the same areas. This authority is supposed to reduce red tape, though many think it will do the reverse, which is worrying. The Great Ocean Road is in my electorate. It's about 20 minutes down the road, actually, from where I live, and living quite close to it, I've been lucky enough to travel it many, many times. There are many statistics that the Minister and members in this other place, and this place have cited about its visitorship, its income generation and comments about its historical significance, including that it was built by our diggers, as we all know. I will echo all of these statements and sentiments. I'll also say that if anyone in this place hasn't experienced its beauty with your own eyes, you have to do it. It's just magical. This bill, therefore, I hope, will allow the governing of this incredibly important asset and make sure that it is preserved for generations to come. I don't think the bill is perfect, and in fact, I have an amendment which I will circulate now, if that's okay, and one which deals with the one imperfection of the bill. I've circulated information about this amendment, but it basically deals with the issue of the authority asking for tolls, fees and other charges for things like car parking and entry to attractions. This is something that was established in the first bill, and I'm grateful to see that the first bill allows certain persons to be exempt. This certain persons could mean locals, for instance. What this bill doesn't do is mandate that any of these fees, tolls or charges that are regulated have been assessed against any financial burden on local communities. My amendment, if passed, will ensure that this happens. I understand that the government has the belief that these considerations, and therefore the amendment, will already be covered through the regulatory impact statement. And while this may be the case, the point remains that there's no current mandate. It is not legislated and therefore is not subject to potential oversight through the regulatory impact statement. The other reason for the government's opposition to this amendment is apparently that it's not legal, due to the Governor and Council not receiving advice from the authority by convention. What the government will be very happy to hear is that the legal advice we've received is that this amendment is sound. And it is sound because the way it has been drafted requires the Governor and Council to receive advice from the Minister, who would in practice receive advice from the authority. This is how the regulatory impact statement would be formed anyway. My amendment simply requires the Minister, on advice from the authority, if any, to consider, and I quote, any financial impacts or burdens on local communities of the fees, unquote. This is really straightforward, and I'm not sure how the government can dispute it. What might this look like in practice? Well, if you live in Torquay and you work in Lawn and you have to pay to park your car out the front of, for instance, Chopsticks every day, where you work, it'll be a cost of $25. This should be considered by the Minister on advice from the authority. If I want to go for a walk on one side of the coastal trails, I shouldn't have to pay for it. And if the authority decide that they want to charge people to use this asset, they should have to assess what the financial impact on locals might be. I look forward to the Chamber's support of this amendment in the committee stage. There's a few other things about this bill that I'm not particularly happy about, and they're not necessarily things in the bill. In fact, they're things that should have been in the bill that aren't, that should have been in the bill that aren't. There is no asset register for a start. How are we supposed to know what assets the authority will take over and which ones it will not? Councils are understandably worried about the financial position that they may be put in because of the authority's seniority and the assets it may feel obliged to adopt. I'd seek clarity from the government about what processes for negotiations are when there are assets that the authority doesn't want to take over. The second thing missing that I thought would have been fairly important is a business case. I know I said earlier that this authority is bipartisan, but if we're spending public money, shouldn't we have weighed up the benefits versus the costs of the authority? And further, shouldn't this business case have flagged ways the authority will make money to stay self-sufficient in the future? For example, will we see every car park along the Great Ocean Road turn into a money-making exercise so the authority can buy investments and securities as allowed by the bill? These are things that, as members voting on this bill today, we really should have been given to us. It's important that we have the full picture on exactly what we're voting for. In terms of the authority's job to govern the Great Ocean Road, I have a few members of the community and committees of management make it clear that the authority needs to represent all townships. My office is in Torquay, and this is where the authority have set up their office. And whilst Torquay's township is amongst the biggest, if not the biggest, along the road, there are fears it will get all the funding. I'm not able to say who should get the funding, but I will pass on those comments that the distribution of not only money but also time, energy and careful planning should go into the length of the road. The last thing I want to raise about this bill is in its role in managing national parks. I've been given assurances by the government that the authority will adopt all obligations currently bestowed on Parks Victoria in relation to becoming the land manager for national parks. My office has spoken to the Victorian National Parks Association, who are concerned about the conflicting responsibilities of the authority to create and maintain tourism opportunities as well as preserve the land they manage. They are the same objectives on one hand and completely conflicting in another. I concur that it will be a hard job to achieve both objectives at the same time. I do commend the government on a few protections in the bill to ensure that national parks are held in the highest responsibility, and the commitment that Parks Victoria staff won't be made redundant by the passage of this bill. The VNPA did wonder why a veto power or memorandum of understanding wasn't explored to allow Parks Victoria to have a say in the decisions made in regard to national parks. Seems like it would have been a good idea, given Parks Victoria apparently already has an obligation to cooperate with tourism bodies currently. I understand that this unfortunately wasn't part of the government's plan for this bill though. I just wanted to get on the record the handful of issues that I have mentioned. I don't think this was done perfectly, but our party does support the authority. We hope it increases good governance of the Great Ocean Road and surrounding townships, and I look forward to reducing bureaucracy for locals, councils and tourists alike. I commend this bill to the House.